All right, Lily, thanks so much for doing this. First off, just tell me, the audience, a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the mental health space.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this important topic. How did I get started in the mental health space? Good question. So I had definitely my own mental health struggles growing up, and I I kind of connected with the idea of people's stories. I loved like hearing people's stories, learning about their stories, learning about like different healing journeys. So I actually wanted to be a physical therapist before I became a social worker. And one of the things I really loved about physical therapy was that there was this kind of healing journey physically, but also you were doing some of the emotional work because you were talking to people and learning about their stories. And eventually, I worked in a homeless shelter and really connected with more of the mental health and social justice aspects of this work. So I shifted and went to social work school and got my master's in social work. And it's kind of just been a winding journey from there of figuring out, which populations I've really enjoyed working with, but also found success working with and really feeling like I can help them heal. I think there's so much relief that people are looking for, and I hope that I can provide them with a little bit of relief in their day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm. And tell me a little bit about the work that you do, because I understand you're the CEO or the head of Thrope Therapy.
Yeah, of course. So I started Thrope Therapy in 2021. It was during the pandemic, and I had been working in private practice for a few years prior to that. And I really wanted to create my own practice because I wanted it to be a space that was specific for eating disorders. And having my own experience with eating disorder recovery, I knew that there needed to be a dedicated space where clients could feel really comfortable knowing that we're experts in this. And it's not just like, a little line on our profile of like, I also do eating disorders. It's like, this is really where you can come to find expertise, but also safety and comfort working on recovering from your eating disorder. And over my time, I have four clinicians on my team, and we all have kind of different subspecialties. And one of the things that I've enjoyed working with and have experience with that has been really great is working with people who are in larger bodies, working with people who are recovering into larger bodies, and the kind of unique challenges that they face in this eating disorder recovery community that is not really talked about. A lot of people focus specifically on um, other body types, and this is not something that I see a lot of people specializing in.
Mm-hmm. You said now do you primarily focus on eating disorders, or is that like not the only topic that you cover?
Yeah, good question. I would say maybe 70% of the work I do is eating disorder work. I do within eating disorders, there's obviously such a variety. There's so many different types of eating disorders and ways that they manifest. I'd say the other 30% is anxiety, depression, OCD, which can also overlap with eating disorders as well. And then I also do family work. So I'll work with couples or families, especially of like teens that are navigating an eating disorder in the family. So kind of running, a big, broad span of all of the eating disorder challenges and impacts, and then also some more general anxiety, depression, OCD.
How do you sort of navigate, folks that are dealing with eating disorders? What modalities do you use?
Yeah, so I would say use like an intuitive eating anti-diet approach. And I think it's not let's say that's not a very like clinical approach. I think obviously intuitive eating is its own like clinical perspective. But I definitely come in with an individualized approach. So I have a background in being a certified intuitive eating counselor. I've done a lot of like work on breaking down stigma around fat phobia. And I like to provide a space where people can feel safe to process any of the different challenges that are coming up from being in a body, right? Being in a body just has we hold a lot of trauma in our body. We hold a lot of pain and grief. And I use a lot of like body grief modality. I try to focus on how can this person find relief? So I think like back to what I was saying, sometimes figuring out the root of things can give you relief, but sometimes it doesn't. And really just meeting clients where they're at, figuring out what is going to provide relief. I would definitely say I pull from CBT, I pull from DBT. I use a lot of different skills work. I think skills work can be incredibly empowering, as well as just, relational talk therapy. So I pull from a lot of different things, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And so like in the therapy room, like let's say for example, somebody is coming in with an eating disorder and they're sort of struggling to sort of, figure out, what how to navigate the complexities of their own body within themselves. How do you sort of help them through that? Like if if they lack self-confidence or like self-esteem, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think so many people are not comfortable in their own skin and have a really hard time connecting with their bodies. So probably the work would revolve around slowing things down, understanding their narrative and journey with their body. So, how was their body spoken about as a kid by their parents, their peers, and creating safety in their body? I think that's the number one thing that I would say is like a through line for all the work that I do is how do we find more safety in our body? I think when we feel safe and comfortable in our bodies, we can have confidence. We can access that self-esteem that we couldn't before. So I think that might look different for different people because everyone feels safe in different ways. But I think trying to find that safety would probably be my first step with clients.
Mm-hmm. And how does that sort of eating disorder sort of manifest itself in different contexts, like in work or in school or like even in like your like social life, relationships, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think eating is obviously something that happens every day, right? We have to eat, an average of 3 meals, 2 snacks every day. And if it's stressful for you to eat, it impacts your work. If you are not eating enough, it impacts your ability to be in relationship with other people, to do good work, to think clearly, all of those things. And I think there's also a lot of secrecy and shame around eating, whether it's restricting or binging. I think both of those can have a lot of shame wrapped up in them. So I think it can feel almost like you're living a double life at times, and that can feel really isolating. And I think relationships can be really impacted by that.
Mm-hmm. And how does sort of the media culture like view eating disorders?
Oof, yeah, that's a good question. So I think the media it plays a big role in this. And I think social media specifically has become really impactful on eating disorder work. And I think the eating disorder rates have been rising significantly due to social media. I do think like some of the misconceptions that media portrays is that eating disorders have a look. And if someone, appears very thin, they have an eating disorder. And I think there's a lot of like preconceptions about what an eating disorder looks like when there's actually many different eating disorder diagnoses and presentations. They present differently, and every type of body, every type of person can be impacted by an eating disorder. And I think often we have this perception that it's only a certain subset of culture that's impacted, and that just like couldn't be further from the truth.
Mm-hmm. What have you learned in doing this kind of work?
Good question. Oh, people just have such a big capacity for pain and joy. Like it's amazing to be able to sit with people in kind of like the deepest and hardest moments of their life and then also be able to celebrate, the little wins along the way. I've learned so much about myself and my understanding of the world through other people's understanding and experiences and narratives. And I just feel so grateful to be able to sit with people on their journeys. I feel really lucky to do the work that I do.
Mm-hmm. and to sort of understand people's experiences, do you talk to people like on the street? Do you like give conferences, or like what do you do to sort of understand, the stories and the struggles that they go through?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, I speak to my clients, so those are people I talk to. I would say I'm the type of person that talks to strangers, so I definitely, I was just actually in Disney World and I met a lot of different people just standing in line, talking to other people, noticing, their families, or maybe they're wearing a shirt that says, celebrating my birthday. And it's just always such a pleasure to learn about other people and connect. I think back to social media, one of the fallacies of social media is that it connects you with people when actually I think most people report feeling disconnected while they're on there. And I think one of the best things we can do is just talk to each other and actually, open your mouth and talk to a human being. And, even if you're ordering at Starbucks, like ask them how their day's going. It really goes a long way. And I fear for how disconnected people feel at this moment.
Hmm. A social media detox is always good.
Definitely.
My last question is, how do you now that we laid out some of the eating disorders and what goes on with it, how do you sort of change the narrative to sort of say you know people, people who struggle are actually people. They're not objects of like um that can't be, how should I say this, taken for granted or like glorified, you know what I mean? Like represented as like real people that are understood and seen.
Yeah, I think there's so many things that get validated that are actually really harmful. And I think that's maybe what you're describing. Like when people are losing weight, for example, someone might say, "Wow, you look so great. What's going on?" And we actually don't know what's going on with that person. We don't know if they're facing an illness. We don't know if they are struggling with an eating disorder. We don't know anything about what's going on for them. So I do think just not trying to learn someone's story by looking at them, that's something I really try to remind myself is like you can't know a person's story just by looking at them. If you can take the time to talk to them and inquire and learn about them and they're open to sharing, I think that can be really powerful versus making up your own assumptions and beliefs about a person just based on how they look.
Mm-hmm. All righty.